is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your midwife, teacher, and host for this podcast. Together, you and I are going to navigate the interior life. And we're going to do that by unearthing our personal truths, our own insight, and our inner knowing. These are weekly teachings that are brought to you by hard-nosed scientific evidence focused on spiritual direction with integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work.
Hello.
Hello, Sarita.
Hi, Vivian. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so very super fracking logistic, whatever that, super fragilistic.
Super fragile. Oh, gosh.
I'm super fragilistic, excited that I get to interview you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I love having chit-chats with you. So
Aren't they wonderful?
It'll be fun.
Yeah. This will be like the way that we normally talk, I hope.
Yeah.
You're awesome and amazing. And I actually wanted to take a chance to have you tell your story of sort of going against culture or following your heart.
Okay.
And introduce you formally.
All right. Where to begin? It could be the long-winded story or the short version. I'll give you a little bit more of the short version. As a kid, I promise this is the short version.
We're in for the long haul, Sarah. I'm
all
in
right.
it.
Well, we'll see where it takes us.
Okay.
No, I think, honestly, when I was thinking about my story, it does start, obviously, as a kid. And it's obviously easy in hindsight to kind of connect the dots and see how everything makes sense or falls into place. But when I was a kid, I always like a little bit about a lot. So when I think about like my extracurriculars and everything that I've done, I've done dance, ice skating, sports, guitar, flute, and I feel bad for my parents because I'd probably go through the whole registration process and I'd be in whatever I was doing for about a week and I'm like, no, done. Just because, like I said, I liked a little bit about a lot and I wanted to be an expert instantly, but that never happened. And so this kind of became problematic for me as I went into high school and college because it was still a pattern of mine. I mean, in high school, I could never figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I kind of just knew simply that I was going to be going to college because that's what you do. And then once I got to college, choosing my major was one of the most stressful events of my life. My poor parents, I'd call them or talk to them just bawling, trying to figure it out. I've switched majors so many times. I first thought I was going to do pre-med because I went for security. And I always thought, hey, I'd be helping people. And, you're always going to need medical assistance until I hit chemistry class, which absolutely sucked. And then, I kept on trying tons of different things. I love psychology, and I ended up just choosing what I ended up majoring in, which is psychology, communication, and Spanish, because I liked it. And so that still didn't necessarily put me up to, in my eyes, what I was going to be doing next in terms of a career. It just kind of felt like a conglomerate of stuff. And I didn't know how that would help me in the career world. But once graduation came, I knew the one thing I knew was like, there's no way I'm ready to kind of get dressed up each day and go to the office. And, that was the one thing I was like, no, not going to do that yet. So I actually decided to volunteer. And so I found a volunteer program that fit for me in Quito, Ecuador. And so it was a year-long commitment. And then lo and behold, I fell in love, so it's a little bit cliche perhaps, because before that, dating wasn't my thing. I didn't have time for it. It just didn't seem necessary at the time. I was a little bit of the Miss Independent. Mm-hmm. And so prior to that, I'd always thought and made decisions with my head instead of my heart. And with this instance, I kind of went from one end of the spectrum to the next and decided to make decisions with my heart. And instead of being Miss Independent, I started living for my relationship. And in the process of a few years, I lost myself in it. And so, yeah, I mean, it was kind of like the whole not knowing my passion, not knowing what I want to do with my life career-wise was one thing. But then adding on top of, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, plus not knowing who I was anymore kind of was like a recipe for a real mess. And so that's kind of what brought me to the point of I don't know what to do anymore. I was at a complete loss. And that was probably about 2014. And I ended up, talking to family and friends. And none of that, I mean, to some extent it helped. But I didn't start feeling like I was kind of coming back to myself until I hired my life coach who helped me do that. So that's kind of a quick summary of my story, if you will.
Well, you said that you chose security when you picked pre-med. So yeah. If you've made a different decision, what did you choose instead of security?
Well, the biggest thing is I am like a security freak. That's a big driving factor. And when you think about, I don't know, human nature, that's kind of like one of the most basic needs, if you will. And it drives a lot of my decisions, and it's been a theme throughout my entire life. And working with my life coach, that was one of the kind of biggest aha moments for me, was that, I'd always been striving to find security, whether it be financially or even in my relationships, ensuring somehow that it would always be perfect and okay. And what I came to realize is that this security that I'm always looking for outside of myself in a job, in a relationship, doesn't exist to a certain extent. The only true sense of security that I have is that I personally will always have my back, no matter what happens. And so once I was able to get grounded in that, a lot of things started to shift in terms of where I place my energy and my priorities.
You also said that you lost yourself in your relationship. Where did you find yourself?
At the bottom. Yeah, I mean, when I think about my situation, like I said, I went from one end to the next. And so always being the girl who always thought with her head and was very logical about things, like being thrown into like this emotional roller coaster and tornado effect. I found myself one day looking at myself in the mirror, and I looked at myself in the eyes, and it was like this placid look looking back, like I couldn't connect to the person behind the eyes. That really freaked me out, because it was kind of like I had always known who I was, and kind of like, looking at myself and then asking that question, like, where are you? Like, who are you? What is going on? That was kind of the thread that like led me back to myself, that reconnected me. And so it was kind of like at that unnerving moment that I began to kind of take steps to reconnecting with myself, if you will.
Yeah. So one of the big things that comes up for the listeners is because they're generally in the beginning stages of this. So I'm really curious to hear, what were your first steps that you took?
Well, here's my thing. When I was caught up in not knowing who I was, a lot of like stuff was going on around me. I was in my then relationship, and I was engaged, and I was trying to kind of figure out, because it was an international relationship, where we're going to get married, how we're going to get married. And there was like a lot of like this marriage stuff around everything, and like the logistics around that. And with that, just a lot of mental stuff. Like it felt like I was in a little hamster wheel just spinning, but like I was flying. Like I had speed, but nothing was ever happening. Nothing was coming of it except stress and tension and frustration and, just total sadness from it all too. Just not being able to complete things like I like to do. And so I had, like, it sounds counterintuitive, but it was kind of like the only action I could take that would actually help me was this sense of inaction. Like, because I wanted to be moving. I wanted to be moving forward and kind of making progress, but I wasn't actually doing it with any sense of traction. So I had to take a step back. And that's where I started to realize and learn what this whole sense of groundedness was. Just basically this is what my coach helped me with because it was so foreign at the time, was learning like to come back into my body, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? And it really was just kind of coming back and paying attention to where I was presently in the moment and, letting go of like whatever was happening in my head because it was still happening, but just paying attention to me now. And there was a lot of skepticism around that, but it actually, truly, honestly helped. That's what I needed most at that time.
Oh, that's awesome. That reminds me of a tool that I talk about called the Texas two-step, because you're right. It's counterintuitive. We want to move forward, but often the very first step is to step back. Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned the tornado, I actually saw like stepping into the center of the tornado where it's actually calm as a step back. Mm-hmm. We don't want to do that. We feel like it's going backwards.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you went from head to heart, and now you're sort of in a dance between your head, heart, and your hands. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Say more about the hands a bit.
I don't know. I just think I see this sort of seesaw, right? If it was an extreme of head and heart, in the middle of that is sort of both arms. And kind of, do you feel more balanced? I guess I'm looking at it as a seesaw because you presented it as a sort of extreme from one end to the other.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have that visual, but that would make sense now.
You know how I am with visuals.
Yeah, I love it.
Pictures dance in my head. When I was young, I used to there was a playground right behind our apartment complex back in the hood. And I would stand in the middle of the seesaw and try to balance it on both ends. It was really fascinating.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, and then you could run and jump off.
Well, actually, we did something that was a lot more dangerous that some adult should have told us not to do. But I don't remember anyone breaking bones. One person would be on one end and the other one would like jump and make the other one fly over.
Like all the way over?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like catapult them over?
Total catapult.
Ouch. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. No broken bones. I don't think
like pray as you go up and then come back down. I don't know.
Yeah, I've done that, and then you land really hard, and it's absolutely painful. But
I don't remember any of the pain. I just remember the exhilarance of like being in the air.
Cool.
But I'm really good about forgetting stuff.
Nice.
I checked out your beautiful website.
Yeah.
And you said there was a couple of words that jumped out at me. One was a reflection of the true you and work that matters. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. A reflection of the true you kind of comes from what I felt like I was always trying to do or being like forced not to do in my whole job search. Because I think authenticity is what makes people feel most at home, in terms of like what people strive for. What I strive for myself was just kind of like being able to be who I was and be successful in that way. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I felt like if I were kind of pushed into an office job just because I needed to make money or whatever the circumstance was, even down to just simply the attire. Like I hated wearing button-down shirts and like, black slacks and that kind of thing just because it was so uncomfortable. And I would always try to be, professional and paying attention to business etiquette. And I felt like that oftentimes kind of wasn't the truest reflection of who I was. It was a facade. And so one of my biggest things, especially with the individuals I work with, is helping their true self, like the true reflection, come out so that people can really see who they are. Because that, in my experience, is one of the most, rewarding, for lack of a better word, but just most comforting and most kind of fulfilling experiences, is to be who you are in your work and in every aspect of your life. So that's why I say a reflection of your true you. And what was the other one?
Work that matters.
Work that matters. Yes. Everyone has their own definition of that. But I think there's this intrinsic sense of what we do has a ripple effect. And personally want to make sure that the ripple effect that I'm making is connected to who I am and what I want to see happen in the world. And I know my clients do too. It doesn't feel good to be spending, when you think about the amount of time and energy that you put into your work, you want it to be something that you like doing and that you're proud of. And sometimes we get caught in situations where that's not happening. And yeah, I guess so. It just is so essential to be able to do work that matters, whether that's, baking cookies or, standing on a podium, in front of an international audience. Whatever that is, isn't the question, but it matters to you and the difference that you want to make.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I hope, I'm feeling it. I don't know if it's a full-on movement, but this idea that we went from, right after, I guess it was it Vietnam or World War II, when all the soldiers came back and there were these cookie cutter houses and this idea of the man goes to work, the woman stays home. It became like this box to fit in. And I feel like that box, which became a cage for many, is starting to unravel. Do you see that happening in our society, especially here in the Western world?
Yeah, totally. And even industry-wise, like on a larger scale. I mean, I know we've chatted about this once or twice before, but when you think about like the Industrial Revolution and how like humans were basically put into factories to function like robots, essentially, and our school systems and our education kind of like, worked in alignment with that. And I think now it's kind of like people are taking a second and they're saying, hold up, I don't like this. And it's not working anymore. So slowly, there's a shift taking place, which is really unnerving, obviously, because change can tend to be that way. But I think it's for the better, most definitely.
Yeah, I think designing our humanity back into our living, even if it is tough to get used to, is going to be the best yes for everyone, in my opinion. You're right. We do talk about a lot of stuff, and I love our chit-chats. I think one of the things that I find, even when you said, that you lost yourself in relationships, I think we can sometimes lose ourselves in something in a good way. That's when the flow happens and when we lose track of time.
Yeah. There's definitely a difference in the feel.
Yeah.
There's like a certain sense of comfort that you have in losing yourself in something that you absolutely love, and I don't want to say right reasons, but it is kind of like, how you lose yourself in it for the right reasons. You're not searching for something in something. You just kind of are compelled to do it. Whereas like when I think about what it was like to be lost in a relationship or lost to something else, whether it's an ideal or kids or a job, it's kind of like, your soul is being sucked out of you to a certain extent. Maybe that's a little bit extreme. But when you're doing something that you love, it's like you just kind of like, instead of something being sucked out of you, you just filled up more and more and more until you're overflowing. And then, the final product is like, whoa.
Yeah. And what you just said, like, this is the theme of this conversation, in the entire podcast, is this movement from looking to the outside, whatever it is, to fulfill you, to make it matter. And then, remembering and turning back into what matters to you. But whatever we are sort of focused on the outside, there's a death of that has to happen in order for this personal rebirth. And I think the most recent one for me is, this idea that my children are grown men, because they are. And so now that pain of loss is gone because I see this birth of them and their lives coming up. It's almost like another plant growing. And when I sort of attach to the nostalgia of before, because we can do that really super easily, I say, what are you doing to let them be free? Because we all want to be free to be ourselves.
Right.
But it's hard to let something die and even believe that something better will be born in its place.
Right, because therein lies that the in-between. Right, if we were able to simply jump from being one flower to the next, perhaps may seem a little bit easier on the outside. But there is this process of the great unknown in between, which is freaking scary. And that's, I think where my turmoil came from too, is because it's like you don't want to fully let go until you can see what's on the other side, but you can't unless you let go.
Ooh, that's good.
It's true, right?
It is true.
And
it is hard Because we do want to see what's on the other side. But that's where this idea of a leap of faith comes in. Knowing that if this isn't, if this is over, or this is done, or this needs to be reborn, you know that the next thing. Because I think for me, when I look at the gap, when I look at I'm here and I want this instead, I'm like, but is that going to be better than this? Right? Mm-hmm. There's this comparison that naturally happens in the human brain.
Well, I think our culture, what we've been conditioned to believe, I mean, we always have this phrase, the grass is greener on the other side until you get to the other side, They kind of like, we have these ingrained thoughts of like that conflict with each other, we do want to progress, but then we have to make sure that it's that sense of security again, like that it is actually going to be what we want, but we don't know unless we try. And so, it's a lot of back and forth in terms of what we've been told also.
Oh, and when you said the grass is greener on the other side, I actually literally spent years meditating on that and looking for examples and evidence. And what I came to personally on this idea that the grass is greener on the other side, the grass is greener on the other side because it is watered and it is fertilized.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's because your attention is on that grass instead of your own grass.
Exactly. Well, and it's also kind of like the grass is greener where you water it. That's essentially what this idea is,
Where your attention goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because therein lies a whole nother strategy, right? Where you put your attention is what literally grows. Not even grass, but anything. Like, I know the neuroscience, somebody came up with this analogy. I wish I could credit it to them. But that our brains are on tofu and they have a Dyson vacuum cleaner attached to them.
I haven't heard this one.
You haven't heard this one?
No.
I love this one. So imagine, you've had tofu, right?
I have not.
You haven't had tofu?
I have not eaten
So
tofu.
the idea of tofu is that it's very malleable. It's very could be mushy, could be hard. And the most fascinating thing for me about tofu is that it will take on the flavor of whatever you cook it with. I had a girlfriend back when David was in the service in Fort Lee. She made magic with tofu. I mean, oh my gosh. So your brain is on tofu, which is malleable, and it'll take on the flavor of whatever you marinate it in. And then this Dyson, and you know about Dyson, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't know about Dyson is like this super magic, forceful, super duper vacuum cleaner. So tofu with a Dyson attached, you're literally forming your reality because your brain takes your instructions. Really, that's what it's there for, right? You're saying, I'm looking for blue. And it just starts to pull in blue from everywhere. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to work at it anymore once you give it an instruction. The fallback is that the instruction we give our brain is subconscious, and we're not consciously telling it what we really want. We're actually allowing it to feed us with what we're afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And then, the process in terms of how to overcome that is just, what you had said, what do you do when you realize you're lost and confused? What was your next step? It was kind of coming back to yourself, getting grounded, finding that stillness, and then paying attention to what is actually going on up there and how it's working for you and how it's not.
Yeah, and understanding our own language instead of the language of culture.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Which feels oftentimes from my own experience, it was trying to decipher what that was I don't know, the ultimate quest in terms of how do you even begin? But that then also is not a head game. It's kind of being in your body again and feeling into it, knowing because of what it feels like rather than what it sounds like.
That's a really good point. And I don't think we're ever really done with that. I think this, exploring our belief system and whether or not it's true for us is totally ongoing. But it makes me feel like a little kid, like I'm not grown up yet when I get faced with it.
Well, which is fun in a sense, because people always say, enjoy the ride. I love going to amusement parks and going on rides, even if I'm, not a little kid anymore.
I don't know. Lately, I'm a roller coaster person. Put me on. And that's really, you're right. That's a really great metaphor for life. You're buckled in, you're going to get some highs and lows, but you're safe. Mm-hmm. Throw your hands up and enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to mention this This has happened recently. This is about real life. Jacob's at TCU, and he's in a fraternity, and we were at a meet and greet. We were the only brown people there. So it made me feel uneasy. But then I thought, why am I feeling uneasy? Like, I've become a scientist about everything that's happening to me.
Yeah.
So this uneasiness, anything different, absolutely anything different than what we're doing every single day is going to be uneasy for us. But we've got to feel into it and know what it is. What about it is us? And what about it is just unfamiliar, or maybe it's not right for us?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, and I think when you said that too, when you say you become a scientist in it, it's also, just because we're talking about roller coasters and being kids versus adults, you can tap into that 2-year-old self too and use it as a tool. When you think of the why,
Mm-hmm.
this, never ending why, that's also helpful in these instances in terms of being a scientist. Because these things, like you, for example, realizing your uneasiness and asking yourself why, that often goes unchecked, right? That's often kind of the mind tornado that kind of starts something and it just takes off. And so being able to kind of ask yourself why before you let it kind of get out of control is where your control is. Right?
That's such a good point. That is such a very, very, very good insight. So let's say that the difference between this experience and an experience years ago would have been that would have been stuffed down and ignored until it literally was a volcano that blew up. Mm-hmm. And so I just prevented a volcano.
Yeah, and there are so many things that tell us not to do that. I mean, suck it up, push through, the grind, the grit, all of that. Like, we're told, don't acknowledge it. It's just, and I think that's kind of the misconception around how you get rid of fear, right? Mm-hmm. If you push it away, if you don't acknowledge it, it's not there, which isn't the case. It's always there. But if you kind of discredit it, that's where it loses its power.
Yeah. Here's something fascinating. If the language or the instructions are the grind, the grit, push through, and that was the old school, right? And this is the new world. What are our new instructions? What do we have instead of that?
Well, semantically, I could go.
Yeah. Do it.
No, I don't know. I mean, so when you think of grind, like flow, perhaps, the push would be the pull. Grit, I don't know. You got to help me with that one. I don't know. Maybe just ease.
Easy. Yes.
Yeah. Ease.
Well, and honestly, isn't that what we teach people? We teach people to go with their flow, right? Where are you losing track of time? What is like filling you at your soul level? And what is pulling you forward? Where are you yearning? What is that whisper?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. And then ease. My gig is all about ease, fun, and play.
Yes, please. Right?
We're smarter than we know, Sarah.
Right.
We and you too. You are totally smarter than you realize. Mm-hmm. That was fun. So that's the new instructions for the new world. Let it be easy.
Yes. Let your pull lead you. Definitely.
So here's another fascinating thing because it's different for everyone. So I'm curious about what it is for you. That whisper of our pull, that learning our own language of curiosity is different for everyone. What is yours and how did you tap into that? Sort of giving instructions to the turning inward listeners.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I had been a person of wanting to take action, but it never coming into reality. It just never happened. And so it was a lot of premeditated thought and planning and I'm a list maker. I just go nuts on that and I love it. But it also got in my way a lot. I didn't let not spontaneity take place, but it was more I was so focused on planning and kind of making sure things happened the way I wanted them to happen that they didn't happen. And so what I started paying attention to was what I would talk myself out of mentally. I rationalize. I'm the queen of rationalization. And so sometimes, even when it came to working out, I would think of, I need to work out. I should work out, blah, blah, blah. And I, set my alarm and I wouldn't wake up. And then, it would just be this cycle of shoulds and, this thought process until all of a sudden, randomly, I would allow myself I want to dance or I want to work out. And it would just happen. I would just do it. And so I guess in terms of like what that feels like for me, like, I mean, I can like literally feel it in my chest and I just do it. There's no like between the feeling and like it happening, there's no thought in between.
Ooh, yes.
Does that
I
make
like
sense?
that. Yes, because when I'm asked, how do you know? You just know. There's a
Yeah.
knowing there. And that's what you're describing.
Yeah. And the happenings just take place.
But how did you learn to trust that?
Oh
Because,
God, baby steps.
right?
I'm still learning to trust it. Believe you me, because yeah, like I said, I'm the queen of wanting security, and that's something that's like a major theme in my life. And so, I think, I've definitely taken some big leaps, and they've proven to be much more than security. They've added so much to my life. And so, but before that, honestly, it was like it was baby steps, like paying attention to like my daily routine. I'm a fairly structured person, so changing up my toothpaste because I wanted a new flavor because it just felt like I wanted a new flavor. Like baby, baby steps.
Yeah, I hear you.
But yeah, then you kind of build up your, I don't know, build up your trust muscles.
Build up your trust muscles. I like that.
So
That's beautiful. So, Sarah, if someone's interested in working with you, who would that be for you and where can they find you?
So honestly, like joy in the world is working with people who kind of were caught where I was in terms of not feeling as if they have a calling, not feeling as if they have like one passion to follow. And they're kind of lost in not knowing what they want to do. Perhaps they're job hoppers. Perhaps they're stuck in, they fell into a position after college and they're still there 10 years later and they hate it. So I love working with go-getter women who are not satisfied where they're at now and want to be satisfied and want to create that life for themselves. And so I've honestly just created a little e-course that helps in that process, the beginning process. It's a 4-part e-course of audio recordings that help kind of create that sense of groundedness that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. So this process takes you from feeling that sense of utter confusion and not knowing what to do and having no clue what you want to do next to feeling much more connected and confident and grounded in yourself and basically being on track to where you want to be. And so I would definitely invite all of the listeners who feel that that's them to take a look at my website. You can sign up for my e-course on my homepage, which is Sarah Dietman, which is DIETMAN.com. So you can check it out there.
Beautiful. Now, and if you had one last piece of wisdom, one last piece of insight, what would your message be to the world?
My message would be that you have all that you need inside yourself, even all of the answers you're looking for outside.
That's a good one. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Vivian. It was great.
Oh, it's always wonderful. I love you.
I know. I have such a big smile on my face right now. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. If you want more help moving forward and breaking out of a negative mental pattern, I personally host an online community of practice for smart, successful women and a few super cool dudes that gives you more support, tailored training, and an unlimited professional coaching. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more. With integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work.